everybody. Welcome to the Questionable Calls podcast. It's Sunday afternoon, little after 4:30 Eastern time. Just kind of watching the last couple of 1 o'clock games wrap up, and we got Baltimore and Rams in overtime. But first, we'd like to talk a little more college football because this reaction to what's happened with Florida State. And listen, I feel bad for Florida State. They definitely got screwed, but this is a situation where somebody would have been screwed no matter what. So, but I want to first off, the thing that I find the most interesting about the reaction to it, Clark, is that the assumption that college football has had their act together this whole time, and this is some kind of outrageous thing that's happened where an undefeated team has been left out, when literally that's the entire history of college football is littered with this nonsense. There's controversy almost, like I was doing some research on this, and there's basically controversy almost every year. Like the 14 playoff is actually better. It's better than it's been, but it's still the same. We're still dealing with a lot of the same stuff. And so I don't understand the outrage when you're talking about, well, college football is unfair. College football has always been unfair. It's never made a whole lot of sense. And, so that's how it works. This is the way the system works. I can understand. We can all disagree with the system. You can say that it should be better, and I agree it should be better. And I want to talk a little bit about the 12-team playoff, before we end on this topic. But it's just that's the thing I can't understand. How are people shocked by this?
Well, everybody's got a really short memory with this stuff. I mean, especially the sports media. I mean, we just do the same thing year after year after year. People it's like when I know Greeny loves to do this where he'll be like, this is the team that no one wants to face in the playoffs. And he'll do that with like the NFL or the NBA playoffs. And it's just like, yeah, this is a team that's basically struggled all year and they have like some talent on there, but they're not really that great. But we're just going to talk about this anyway, and then we're going to keep asking the same questions that usually have the same answer every year. Well, can the Dallas Cowboys get it done this year? No, they can't. I mean, people just, with all sports they do this. I know I'm giving examples of the NFL, but with college football, yeah, there's no looking back memory of what happened here, what happened here. Maybe there's a little bit, but for the most part, no. It's just everything that's what's going on right now and what happened now, and now must be the biggest travesty of all time. So yeah, that doesn't really surprise me. That's just sort of same shit, different day, as far as I'm concerned. But I do want to, and I think maybe I said this on the last podcast, but there was a show called Brockmire, which again, this is about a different sport, but it's about a fictional baseball announcer. And anyway, actually, I don't think he said this on the show. Wait a minute, I'm totally confusing this. He didn't say this on the actual show. He used to do appearances on the Dan Le Batard show, and he made an appearance on there, and he said baseball is at its best when it's at its most absurd. And I think college football, the same could be said, because everybody complains about how different teams get screwed, but that's been our experience with college football the whole time. It's baked into it. It almost makes it better because it's so absurd. How we have a split national championship. I mean, are you kidding me? A split what other sport would do that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. But again, it's just the absurdity is kind of baked in. To me, to be honest, to me, it's what makes it fun. But no one, like you said, no one has a good memory of this stuff. They don't remember all the old stuff that happened.
Yeah, it's insanity. And I just, this is not, Florida State not making the playoff is not out of the ordinary for college football. It's pretty normal. Like what's been strange for the last 10 years is we haven't really had 4 good teams. And so that's the strange part. What's happened in this is the year that's kind of really weird because we normally don't have that kind of stuff happening. So I went through some of the data here, and I'm I'm going to run through this, as quickly as I can. So since the poll era started, basically since 1950, when, by the way, this is how we used to decide the champion, folks. Everybody would play their games, and then the next day, the newspaper writers would get up and go, "All right, who do you think should be the national champions?" Well, let's give it to Pennsylvania. Let's give it to Notre Dame. Let's give it to This is how we used to do it. I just want to point that out. Like, the way that we're doing it now is so much more civilized than this garbage that we used to do back in the day. But anyway, that's how we did it from 1950 to 1998. Okay. So since 1950, there have been 11 split national championships. Okay. There were 3 in the 90s alone. Okay. And then in 1998, we went to the BCS. So, and I'm going through the list. I mean, Clark, we don't have enough time to go through all these championships in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. This is like, it was like every 7-8 years this would happen. So, but I basically limited this down to stuff that happened in my lifetime in general, or stuff that I might be actually able to comment on because I saw some of it. So, 1990, Colorado and Georgia Tech split the national championship, even though lots of people thought Colorado, there was a lot of controversy with that, where the Colorado in one of their games, they got a 5th down, which that caused them to win one of the games they probably shouldn't have won. And so they ended up, but I think Colorado had one loss and 1 tie. By the way, we used to tie games in college football, okay? Until 1998, we had ties in college football. Okay, so let's
and that applied to the postseason as well. They didn't have overtime in the postseason, so right. If you tied in a bowl game, you tied.
Right. So then in 1991, Washington and Miami split the national championship, which the controversy. I mean, this wasn't necessarily controversial. Both teams were undefeated. Both teams were really good. Like, if you watch, this was Miami in their heyday, right? So, but Washington played the number 3 team, Michigan, in the Rose Bowl and beat them by 20. Miami played Nebraska. Nebraska was 11th. They were ranked 11th. Miami beat them 22-0. So, by the way, Miami back in those days always played in the Orange Bowl, which was their home stadium. Okay. Yeah. I don't remember another team playing in bowl games in their home stadium. Anyway, so Washington beat a team that was much higher ranked by about the same margin. But they had to split the national championship, right? 1997, Nebraska and Michigan. Both teams were really good. Both teams went undefeated. Nebraska blew out Tennessee with Peyton Manning, beat them by about 25. Michigan struggled to beat Washington State. Washington State, remember, had Ryan Leaf. They were a really good team, but they beat them. So, I mean, you could have, like, in that scenario, you definitely could have given it to Nebraska. They had the much more convincing win. But, and the other thing that you have to relate this to is every game wasn't on television back then. So the way that everybody talks about SEC bias, it was the opposite back then. Back then, it was more the Midwestern teams, the Big Ten teams, the teams that the whole country watched, right? The SEC was like a Southern thing. That's kind of how it was. That's kind of how it was looked at. 2003, USC goes undefeated, but I think they had. I want to say they had 1 loss, but I can't remember exactly. But they didn't put them in the championship game. They put LSU against Oklahoma, and LSU beat Oklahoma. USC beat Michigan. And by the way, 2003, we're supposed to be done with split national champions. Like, this was supposed to be it. The BCS was supposed to solve that problem. But as always, and within a lot of these things, the AP voters voted for one team, and then whatever team they didn't vote for, the other poll would just vote for the other team. It was like an understanding. Like, I feel like, Clark, these are the days when sports writers used to sit around, smoke cigars, and drink with each other and just go, you know what? Who do you think we should pick for the national champion? So that's how it used to operate. So, and then I just picked some of controversies that I thought were relatively interesting for this. So 1993, Florida State wins the national championship. Yeah. Okay, so Florida State plays Notre Dame in the regular season, which, if you don't know about this game, it was 30 years ago. It was one of the first times I can remember in my life where it was like, this is the game of the century. We use that phrase over and over again. But anyway, Florida State went to Notre Dame, lost to Notre Dame. Notre Dame then lost the next week to Boston College, right? Nebraska was undefeated. Also, little known fact, West Virginia was also undefeated. West Virginia beat Miami that year. West Virginia was undefeated. And they're like, no, sorry, we're not putting you in. So that Nebraska was undefeated. They put, Nebraska went to the Orange Bowl like they always did because this was, we're still in the conference ties to bowl games back then. So Nebraska played Florida State. And for some reason, Florida State was ranked ahead of Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame beat them. So I find this interesting to point out because everybody gets into, well, it's head to head. You can't do that. It's like, okay, well, they did it numerous times when they vote, especially when they voted on this stuff. It happened constantly. So don't tell me, oh no, you can't do that because they're okay. So they didn't put Notre Dame in there. Notre Dame beat Texas A&M in their bowl game, but Florida State beat Nebraska. They gave the championship to Florida State, even though Florida State had one loss, Nebraska had one loss, Notre Dame had one loss. West Virginia went to a bowl game against Florida and got blown out like 41-7. So that kind of quieted that nonsense, which that happens more often than you would think. A team that you think, oh, they might have a shot at the national title, they get blown out in their bowl game. Like, whatever. We don't remember that they were undefeated anymore. It doesn't count. 1994, the next year. Okay, Nebraska goes undefeated. Penn State goes undefeated. Penn State goes to the Rose Bowl, beats Oregon. Nebraska wins their bowl game against Miami. But basically the way I read this and a lot of people's opinions at the time seemed to be, well, Tom Osborne doesn't have a national title and Joe Paterno does, so we're going to vote for Nebraska. So there wasn't a split national championship. They just voted Nebraska number one just because.
It's
for
like
whatever.
the Oscars. It's like, Scorsese doesn't have an Oscar yet. The Departed, it's all right. Just give it to him for that. We should have given it to him for Goodfellas, but we fucked up. So you know what?
That's a very good point, Clark. The Oscars. I didn't think about that. It's a Lifetime Achievement Award. That's what's going on here. Oh, yeah. Nebraska doesn't have a national title. You
haven't won yet. You know what? Here, take it.
Yeah. You go ahead. So 2001, I found this one. This was interesting. So Miami, this is Miami, Oklahoma, and Florida State. So Miami played Florida State earlier in the season, beat Florida State, but Miami had already lost a game to Washington. So Oklahoma was undefeated, so they were into the championship game because we had the BCS at this point. But the computers overruled the humans because at this point the computer polls were 50% of the formula at this time. Okay, so the computers liked Florida State better, even though Florida State lost to Miami. So Florida State got to go play to Oklahoma for the national championship, which that happened a lot in the BCS era. The problem really wasn't who was number one. It was who's number two. It was always there was a lot of years where there was a team, clearly this is the best team this year, we'll vote them number one. But how do we pick the second team? That was the issue. So is another example where they put Florida State in, even though Florida State lost to Miami. Head-to-head's supposed to matter, right? So after this year, they changed the formula so that the computer polls were only 33.3% of it instead of 50%. And this is something that kept happening the entire time. Every year, they'd have one formula, they would change it. They'd go, oh, we'll change it to this. We'll tweak it this way. They put a quality win component in one year. Then they took out margin of victory. So they kept adapting the formula to try to fix it so this stuff wouldn't happen, but it never worked. So this whole time they're trying to tell us, no, the formula is really good, even though they continue to change it and modify it constantly. 2004, USC and Oklahoma both went undefeated. Auburn also went undefeated. So I find this one interesting because a team from the SEC wins the SEC conference, goes undefeated in conference. They don't put them in, they shoot, we can only put two teams in. So sorry, we're just going to leave you out. Auburn did struggle to beat Virginia Tech in their bowl game, so they did end up undefeated, but it wasn't as convincing. USC beat Oklahoma by about 30. I think it was 55-19 or something like that. So they had to give it to USC. I think this one, I think is kind of, there's a lot of brand name recognition. Plus USC was really good the year before. So this one I remember at the time really pissed me off because I just felt like Auburn was playing in a better conference. The Pac-12 or Pac-10, whatever it was at the time, was awful, even though USC won it. I'm not saying USC wasn't great, but I don't, So this was clear, like undefeated conference champ. All right, sorry, too bad. I know it's not the 4-team playoff era, but I get it. And then one that I'm always going to remember is the 2014, the first year of the 4-team playoff when so TCU, Baylor, and Ohio State. So basically going into the championship games, TCU and Baylor were both ranked ahead of Ohio State. and Baylor had beat TCU in the regular season, but TCU was ranked ahead of Baylor for a lot of the season. So they started before the conference championship game. TCU ranked ahead of Baylor again. I'd like to point out head to head, TCU lost, but they still ranked them ahead of them. Okay. Then the last weekend, Ohio State beats Wisconsin 59-0. Yeah, 59-0. Now there was no Big 12 championship game at the time. So again, the inequities in college football just create more and more problems. Since we didn't have if we had had a Big 12 championship game, I'll bet I think they probably stick with the team. But then they moved both teams down, moved USC ahead of them to put them in the
Ohio
playoff. Right, they put Ohio State ahead of TCU and Baylor, which I mean, I'm not, I don't think it was the right decision at the time, and I still agree with that. Based on what happened, I didn't, I don't agree with the decision. Now, it worked out because Ohio State went on to win the national championship. I get it. But at the same time, I just feel like we put way too much credit into beating an average Wisconsin team in a championship game when basically they were running up the score. It wasn't like, oh no, they were that much better than them. No, they got the lead and they just continued to try to score to put up more points. And I don't understand what the point of that is. So that's my point. Having said all that, is like, guys, this is, and I'm not even getting, that's the tip of the iceberg, folks. Like, I'm not even doing half of all of the, mistaken championships and teams that got snubbed and all of this stuff. I'm not even touching how much of this there that exists out there. So this idea that, oh my God, this is the worst thing that ever happened to Florida State is just nonsense. This has happened all the time to all kinds of teams. And the undefeated, I get it, undefeated conference champ, I get it, but we've only had the 14 playoff for 10 years. Like, it's a pretty small sample size of what's happened. If we did this for 20 more years, I guarantee you we'd get more and more weird results.
Yeah. It's, it's funny. It's like history repeats itself, or if that doesn't work for you, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Okay. So, I mean, essentially, like, there's a different way that people would get screwed over, but it still happens. And the other thing that people have to remember is, yes, there was controversy in the past, and people would be a little upset about the way that college football picked a national champion. And there was some. I mean, it took a few decades, but there were some people talking about we should have a playoff, and then it just built and built and built and built and built until you got the BCS, and then it was like, okay, we got to fix this. Then we got a 4-team. Now we're getting a 12-team. It just took them decades to get there. But yeah, there was a bunch of controversy before, but guys, the whole thing wasn't about winning the national championship. And I think some of that is residue of the fact that these are student athletes, which first of all is a completely created term that's complete BS. But, they're in college, they're getting an education, they're not professionals, they're amateurs. So, what's the big deal about, having a playoff or whatever? Everything's not about that. And, for a while, it really wasn't about that. It was just about, you go, you play, you try to win your bowl game, you try to beat your rival. You try to have a good season, you try to win your conference, and that's kind of it. And like we were talking earlier this week, Bo Schembechler, he never won a national championship.
And yeah, Michigan has won championship since 1949, and I just told you it's a split national championship. So it's not like we act like these teams. I think Alabama has kind of screwed the whole thing up, where everybody thinks you're supposed to win all these championships all the time. And it's like, that's not what the history of college football is. Like, that's not how it works. Like, the goal was to win your conference, right? Win your conference, you'd go to a really good bowl game, you play a good opponent, and then winning the national championship was like, well, okay, if we do all of that, then maybe we catch a few breaks and everything works out. Maybe we'll win the national championship. It was like I described earlier with Nebraska and Penn State. It was kind of like a lifetime achievement award. Like, if you were a great coach, you wanted to get one, and as long as you got one, that validated that you were a great coach. But again, like I said, they let Bo Schembechler have the job for 20 years, and it didn't matter that he didn't have a national championship. It just wasn't that big a deal. And I'd like to point out, like, this is one of the areas where I think we can actually give the NCAA a little bit of credit. because the NCAA does not run the college. They have nothing to do with the college football playoff. Okay.
Yep.
But they run all the other playoffs for all the other sports. So in FCS, that's the division right below Division One. It used to be called Division One AA, right? They have a playoff every year. It's run by the NCAA. They do it every year. It's not a big deal. If 24 teams get in, they have a whole system for it. They schedule it out. It's not a big deal. So the idea that, oh, well, we can't do that in Division One because of whatever reason that they're telling us is all nonsense. If they wanted to fix this, they would. So that's why I've gone with I've been saying, like, unfortunately, college football deserves this. Florida State doesn't deserve it, right? It's not it's not Florida State's fault, but college football, the ACC, all the other conferences, they deserve it because they've done everything they can to fight like hell to not have a better playoff, right? They could have had a 12-team playoff this year, but they dragged their feet and screwed around. And so they're kind of getting what they deserve. I feel terrible for Florida State's players and their coaches and all of that stuff. But at the same time, it's like the system's been broken the entire time. We can't freak out now because, oh man, the system doesn't work right. It's like, it's never worked right. As a matter of fact, as I just laid out, it used to be 100 times worse.
Yeah. I did want to say something about, it feels like, it's weird because it feels like with sports in the past, in some ways it was less serious than it is now. In other ways, maybe it was more serious. But because that's the only thing that can really explain the fact that you could have this sort of really weird system for determining a national champion for decades. I mean, and the thing is, obviously over time, people got more and more and more upset about it. But there were decades that went by where people just accepted it, But now we take sports, sports has become there's a lot more money involved, in college and in the pros. And so it's just things get taken way more seriously. Plus, we've got social media and we have tons of talk radio and YouTube shows and stuff where people they get really upset about this stuff. So then it helps create like a groundswell where it's like, well, we need to make changes to this. And that's probably why, as we were talking about last week, we've had so many changes just in the last few years. But, it is, the point about it, it being messed up and being unfair. I mean, like you said, it's been messed up and unfair the entire time. It's just that, we just there's stuff that people used to do or we just kind of went along with it. And sometimes it's maybe we didn't know any better. And other times it's just people didn't care enough to fix it. It just, there wasn't as much anger. And I mean, like, there was talk radio in the 90s when that thing happened with Notre Dame and FSU. And there was some outcry a little bit on ESPN and stuff. But then, maybe there would be some articles written about it complaining. And then people just move on. They just, that's just kind of how it was. That's just, people would just accept that that's how it was and they would just move on. So, what else do you want to hit on so
I want to talk about Florida State and all of the stuff that's come out now since they've been snubbed or whatever it is. Look, I understand people have conspiracy theories, and I understand that everybody, the idea that this is what the TV networks wanted, you can't keep an SEC team out, and all of this conspiracy stuff. Like, I appreciate that everybody has all these ideas, but I'm sorry, man, it's all just a bunch of nonsense. Like, I understand that things happen and people are motivated, networks are motivated by different things. I get that. I'm not saying that there isn't anything going on behind the scenes, but the idea that that's what contributed to Florida State not getting chosen, when it's really simple, guys. Like, stop bringing it. And I hate it when it's driving me nuts, like this week, when people are bringing up Alabama's resume against Florida State's resume. Guys, it has nothing to do with resume. First of all, Florida State's resume is built on the fact that their quarterback was healthy. All of the things that they accomplished were when Jordan Travis was playing. So I don't care what Florida State's resume is. It comes down to very, very simple. And they explain it on the selection show last Sunday. Boo Corrigan comes out and says they're not the same team. Like, there's no disputing that. That's the part that I'm just confused about. Like, you can dispute whether you think, well, undefeated conference champ and all that. You can't dispute their reasoning. The reasoning makes perfect sense. Okay,
Well, they
and then
think that it just gives them an out because basically what I'm hearing from people is, well, they have these criteria and basically they just use whatever criteria fits the situation to bail them out when they make, when they make bad decisions. Like, and they're saying, oh, well, it's just convenient that you have this thing in there about we can make our decision based on the availability of coaches or players. Yeah, it's convenient. They just put it in there to bail themselves out. Like, okay. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that that's complete BS, but like, guys, really? I mean, they do have criteria that's written down. Like I don't know what you want. Again, it's one of those things where they're arguing about the system and they're not looking at the way the system's constructed. And then they're saying, well, the system's messed up. That's fine. Okay. You're saying the system's messed up, but they did what they did the best they could with the system the way that it is.
yeah, I totally agree. And this idea that, oh well, they wanted better TV ratings, so they had to get Alabama in there. It's like, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that it makes that much of a difference. Like,
Okay.
now, are
Yeah.
more people interested in Alabama? Sure. But the idea that, oh my God, we've got to do this because, I'm sorry, it's bullshit.
Let me just point this out to people. This was really pissing me off earlier this week. Okay. There seems to be this thing among some people that they think the SEC things are biased toward the SEC for no reason. Like, there's no reason why all these people think the SEC is this good. There's absolutely no reason. It's not like they've won a bunch of national championships in recent history. Like, I mean, good Lord, Alabama's won 6 of them. Georgia won 2. LSU won 1. How far do we want to go back? Florida won 2. LSU won 1, right? And
The
then
SEC,
Alabama started winning them.
they've won
And then,
13 out of the last 17.
yeah. So all you people think, oh, they're just biased towards them and they just hate on the Big Ten, as if there's no reason to criticize the Big Ten either. I mean, are you kidding me? Michigan played that garbage schedule this year. Like, the Big Ten, it's like 2 teams and the rest of the conference is garbage. Okay? And the SEC, they're like, oh, well, look at their bowl record. How up for these games do you think these guys get now? Everybody's skipping out on this, or they're entering the transfer portal, or the coach leaves. Like, you can't use that as a metric. Guys, you literally think there's no reason why they think the SEC is so good. Really? Seriously? All these players constantly get drafted out of the SEC? They win all these national championships? They're in the playoff every fucking year? Like, really? There's no reason for it? Like, guys, you're just... Again, this is one of the things that's it's fun about college football. It gets regional, right? You get Big Ten fans who just get all pissed off about it. And then SEC fans, they don't like the other conferences. And, it's kind of fun. But guys, really, you got to stop this. You sound moronic when you're saying, oh, they're just favoring the SEC for reasons. There's no reason why. They're not really good or anything. They just, they just put them in there because they just like them better. Oh, okay. That just is endlessly frustrating to me.
Yeah, I don't, I just don't, I think it's just, unfortunately, sports has entered that space, like you talk about politics, where just everybody has their side and you're never going to convince anybody that, that there's anything actual real, there's any reality going on. You can't convince anybody they're wrong. They've just decided this is how it is, and they're just going to run with that narrative for the rest of time. And unfortunately, first of all, I never understood, like, when that stuff, like 20, 30 years ago, when it started conferences against conferences and all that stuff, which is the best conference, like, I never cared. Like, I'm not interested. I don't care who the best conference is. Who are the best teams? Like, that's all I really cared about. And you make a good point about Michigan. Michigan getting into the playoff is actually a bigger travesty than Florida State getting in. At least Florida State went and beat LSU, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, what are we talking about? And, the thing that I wanted to, like, I've heard a lot of people this week talk about, well, Florida State would have had their backup quarterback if they'd have, if you given them a month, they would have had their backup quarterback and he would have been able to play in the bowl game. So therefore, you can't use the third string quarterback playing against Louisville as, your reasoning why. And it's like, okay, but these are supposed to be the best 4 teams, right? And I already stated Florida State, it's not like, oh, it was close. No, it wasn't close. Florida State was not even close to what they were with Jordan Travis. And by the way, if you watched the Heisman last night, Jordan Travis was 5th in Heisman voting. Okay? It's not some guy that they had on their team. It's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. The drop-off was huge. And I watched their backup play against Florida the week before. He wasn't good either.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you just look at this realistically. You just can't, the committee can't make decisions based on what they think might happen. They've got to go with what they see on the field. Okay. And what they saw on the field is not a top 4 team. Like, it doesn't matter what they did before. And it's like, I understand, well, it shouldn't come down to that. That's sports, people. Like, that's how sports works.
Well, there's one other point I wanted to make. I was listening to some stuff on YouTube, and they were talking about it was so ridiculous that the SEC commissioner was, all over TV last Saturday, like basically campaigning for the SEC, and you can't have this playoff without an SEC team in it, And some people were complaining, oh, this you can't be, politicking for your conference or whatever. And look, you can be an idealist, or you can live in the real world and get your hands dirty and try to get what you want, okay? And I think what the other conferences, now the Big Ten has really started to get this in recent years, but some of these other conferences, like, the Pac-12, which doesn't exist anymore, or the Big 12 and the ACC, like, guys, if you want to compete with the SEC and the top of the Big Ten, get on board, okay? You understand what the system is. You understand it's kind of corrupt. You do what you can to advocate for your side, okay? So if you want to criticize the SEC commissioner for being on TV, that's fine. Okay, fine, whatever. If you think the system shouldn't be constructed that way, okay, fine. But guess what? It is. So if you're the ACC commissioner, where the hell are you? You should be all over TV, advocating for your conference. The coach should be all over TV. Like we should be, even before the game, the last game of the season is played, we should be in there and explaining the reasons why. You pound the table, okay? Because that's one of the things that some of these other conferences and these other schools, they just don't get. Like, yeah, it matters more to the SEC. And you can complain about that the system allows for them to advocate for themselves and have it, potentially have an effect on the outcome and who gets chosen for the playoff. But that's the way it is. And if you're inside that system and you want to try to get the best that you can for your school or your conference, bro, you got to get in there. Okay. You got to get in there. You got to advocate for it. You got to want it. You got to show people you want it. Okay. Because the SEC and the Big Ten, Michigan and Ohio State, they don't give a shit. They're in there. They're pushing for stuff. They're pushing for, the Big Ten. We're going to get more people into our conference. The SEC, we're going to get more people into our conference. They're not screwing around. So if you want to be competing with them, you can't be screwing around either.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, Clark, don't these conference commissioners, don't they ever worry about the fact that it looks like you're not a serious sport when this is your playoff system? Like, I don't understand how that doesn't bother anybody. And the thing is, and then you go crazy about the playoff thing when you're the one in the position to change it. Like, do something about it. Stop bitching about the system that you have and go do something. Make the system better. It's amazing to me. Like, this would clearly be the second most popular sport in our country, Clark, if they would get their shit together. But when you watch this, you just go, you guys just aren't serious. That's it. You're just not serious because if you were, we wouldn't be debating this crap. So anyway, just the last thing I wanted to talk about was now that we're going to have a 12-team playoff. So I've been thinking about this, Clark, and I'm trying to come up with what are the issues going to be moving forward? Because, the idea, first of all, the idea that a 12-team playoff is now going to fix everything is absolute nonsense. First of all, right off the bat, 12 is not a good number. Like, and I was listening to, I forget, John Skipper from he used to work for ESPN, was on the Le Batard show.
Oh, yeah, I heard some of that.
He was basically saying this, like, it should be 8 or 16. Like, what are you doing with 12? You shouldn't be giving teams bye weeks. You want more games on TV so you can broadcast them. Like, it just doesn't, from a business perspective, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what are you doing? Like, 12 is, like, 4 was not enough, right? Clearly, when you have 5 Power 5 conferences, which we only have 4 now, but we've had 5 this whole time, and they've had a 4-team playoff. Like, I don't know why nobody figured out that was a mistake. And then, you're going to go all the way to 12. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, it should be 8 or it should be 16. Pick one or the other. And I think there's some things that will be helped by this. The conference champions get in and all that. But I'm just brainstorming, just coming up with issues. Number one, the regular season is just going to be minimized. I'm not saying it won't matter. I'm not saying the games won't be fun. I'm not saying people won't watch the games. They absolutely will. But you are taking something away from the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's just not going to be the same. I'm not saying it won't be fun. I'm not saying it won't be entertaining. I'm not saying it's not going to be good. I'm just saying it won't be the same. The Michigan-Ohio State game is just not going to mean the same thing that it meant before.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just going to be, I'm telling you, mark my words, okay? A lot of people do not understand that, okay? And we are going to get to November next year, and people are going to be like, oh, well, what if this team loses? Oh, it doesn't really matter. Okay. And I just, it's, it's just kind of funny to me. Like, I understand people are upset about the way they've crowned a national champion for all this time and they want changes and all this other stuff. And in some ways, I totally agree. But guys, a lot of times we don't realize what we got until it's gone. And I'm telling you, it's like you were just saying, it's not going to be the same. And a lot of people, it's going to take them a while to realize it. And I think some of them will kind of brush it off and just say, well, we fixed the end of the season, or the end of the season's better. More teams have a shot. And okay, I mean, look, that's one way to do things. I mean, every system or every solution to a problem has pros and cons. So it's just, hang on 1 second. Willie, shut up. Hey, shut up. Sorry, my dogs.
Yeah,
are
the first time Ohio State and Michigan play each other in back-to-back weeks, I will be interested to see what the reaction is, because I'm going to laugh my ass off at how stupid the whole thing is.
Yeah.
But I'm now overall I'm in favor of it, because I want. Somebody else is in favor of it too.
Yeah, exactly. Willie, get away from the window. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, dogs, so we got a happy fan base in the background there.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to run through this. These are some problems. I mean, the regular season being minimized, yeah, that's a problem. Conferences will have the conferences won't have equal representation. You've now guaranteed the conference representation will be completely out of whack. Okay, because you're basically going to have, with there's Power 4 conferences now. Those 4 champions will get in and get a bye. Then you'll have the fifth champion, which will be whatever group of 5 team gets in. You'll have 7 spots left.
Willie.
Okay?
Yeah.
Guarantee you those are going to be filled by the Big Ten and the SEC pretty much 99% of the time.
Yeah, so, that's another thing I think people don't really realize. That's going to be something else that they complain about. And they're going to be like, why are all these SEC teams in here? It's like, well, what do you want me to tell you guys? Do you want me to put, Central Michigan in there? Like, what do you want me to do? Like, there's only 12 spots. You're going to give some to conference champions. And some people, I'm telling you, we've already said this, but some people are going to complain about the conference champions. Because one of these years, somebody's going to get upset, and it's like, well, you have an automatic bid, and it's funny because it's the same thing in the NFL. Like when you have a really bad division, I mean, like the NFC South, someone's going to win that division, and they're going to get a home playoff game. It's kind of ridiculous, but
and the other thing is, the conferences thing, that's just going to drive everybody nuts. People are going to be all mad. Well, the SEC gets the SEC and the Big Ten, and by the way, we're likely to get. It's going to happen. I'm not going to say likely. It's going to happen. We're going to get championship games, right? When you get to the championship game, it's likely going to be a Big Ten team against a Big Ten team, or an SEC team against an SEC team that's probably already played each other that year. Like, it's probably almost guaranteed, because they're going to get the majority of the spots. That's probably almost always going to happen. How do you decide between? So basically, like I'm assuming, Clark, the 12 teams, the 12th spot is going to be the Group of 5 team most years, right? Every once in a while, we'll have a Cincinnati or a Boise State or something like that gets themselves higher than 12, but largely that's going to be who it is. So you've got 11 spots for the major conference team. How am I deciding between who gets that last spot? When we're talking about teams that are going to be completely even, like Ole Miss and Penn State and LSU and whatever, like that's going to be an interesting discussion, because you think like it's hard now with the top 4 teams, but at least there are some things we can use to separate them. What the hell do you use a team to separate a team that's like 10-2? How do you separate a team that's clearly not the best team in their conference, but I don't know if they're playoff worthy? So good luck with that. But that's the committee's problem, and that's gonna drive everybody nuts. You brought up the conference championships getting automatic buys. That's going to be a problem. What happens when there's upsets in the conference championship games? Right? There was a year where Missouri won the SEC. Right? What happens when a TCU or Kansas State, like there was a year where Oklahoma, I think it was in the 2003-2004, Oklahoma lost their conference championship game 35-7 to Kansas State. Kansas State had 2 or 3 losses. So you're going to give one of these teams that wins one of these major conferences, not only are they going to be in the top 4, Clark, they're going to get a first round bye. So you're going to give a team that snuck into the conference championship game somehow. Right now, they think they're going to get rid of that because of the lack of, they're not putting divisions and conferences anymore. But the Big 12 champion, numerous years, has been a 2 or 3 loss team. So how is that going to go when you got a team that nobody likes that gets a first round bye? When you give automatic bids and first round buys in a field this small, you're creating problems, right? So I'm not saying now that team that gets the first round bye probably isn't going to win the championship, but they get a pass into the quarterfinals, And then I was thinking about this, Clark. Somebody's going to get to play the Group of 5 team every year. If you're the 5th seed and you barely miss the top 4 and you get to play the Group of 5 team, you get a home game against a team like Liberty or SMU or a team that, whatever, that you're gonna wipe the floor with them, and it's, people are going to complain that that's unfair. So yeah, I don't think there's not a lot of this is just going to be different. I don't necessarily think it's going to be better. Every conference will get at least one representative in there, so that I guess that's a plus. But I mean, Clark, the ACC, and just look at now that I'm thinking about this, look at the ACC and the Big 12, Clark. There's a large percentage of the time where we get some team that has no business being in a 12-team playoff, winning those crappy conferences.
Yeah. But the defense to that will basically be, well, you got to settle it on the field. So the only way for this to be fair is just whatever happens, you win on the field, and then that's just it. And it's like, okay, but again, you guys aren't understanding what made college football unique. So, okay, I mean,
yeah, it's
look, we're going to get more good games, I think, in the playoff.
Yeah,
and so I think that'll be fun, but it's just it's just going to be different. I mean, some of these big regular season games, it's going to be more like the NFL, where essentially it's like, oh, let's see, because like for instance, in the NFL, when you had the Eagles play the 49ers, or the Eagles play the Bills, or the Chiefs play the Dolphins, or the Cowboys play the Eagles, right?
Right.
I mean, those games matter in terms of playoff seeding, but really the real reason to watch that is like, well, let's see how these teams match up, because they might meet later in the playoffs,
right?
Or in some cases the Super Bowl. So it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. That's not as interesting as, well, if you lose this game, you might not be able to make it into the postseason, or into the playoff.
Right.
That puts a whole different spin on everything, and I think people are going to start to wake up to that as it happens next year. But for right now,
yeah, it's this is not, it's not going to be perfect. Will it be better? I don't know if it's going to be better. It's going to be different. I love, we love college football, so we're going to, we're there anyway. Like it's not like we wouldn't watch it anyway. But yeah, it does take a little bit of the luster off of it. But I'm hoping this works. But we know, but the history. If the history of college football, as I read off earlier, tells us anything, this will just lead to more arguments and nonsense. So,
Yeah, probably. So there'll be different kinds of arguments. Yeah.
all right. So, did you want to? You had something you wanted to do on the NFL?
Oh yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of talk about how the regular season doesn't really matter, just not just in the NFL but all sports. And I'm kind of like, well, I was thinking, what if we really tried to rank teams in the NFL, sort of like college football, but at the end of the season we decide who do we think's the best team. Forget having a playoff or anything. Who do we just based on the 17 games that have been played, who do we think's the best team? So let's see. Screen. Okay. All right. Hang on, let me make this full screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so that was on the second slide. So yeah, I just was getting creative. So what if the NFL had no playoff and crowned a champion after the regular season? This year we'll start doing rankings now, and at the end of the regular season we'll decide who we think's the best team just based on the regular season games. So I basically decided, all right, I'll pick like 6 teams, and rank them in order, and then I'll do a different ranking every week. So we'll just call it the NFL regular season title. So I should have put numbers on here, but for the number one team in the NFL right now, in my opinion, it's the 49ers. I'll put the Eagles second. Oh, I got to fix that. Oops, hang on. Anyway, I'll fix that. The Ravens S is down by the Chiefs. Oops. Anyway, so 49ers 1, Eagles 2, Ravens 3, Cowboys 4, Chiefs 5, Dolphins 6. Originally, when I started doing this last week, I didn't put the Dolphins on here, but who did I take off? I think I put the Lions on here, but I don't know. I'm really having trouble taking the Lions seriously. So they just lost to the Bears again today. So, but anyway, I did write down I really did a deep dive on the stats on all these teams. So let me see here. So I've got basically I made a case for each team. And the 49ers case is pretty simple. I mean, they've had 7 really dominating wins where they've won by at least 2 touchdowns or more. They beat the crap out of the Eagles last week. They beat the crap out of the Cowboys. They beat the Jaguars. They've had a few other wins against less than stellar competition, but and in fact, I looked at their point differential. The 49ers are plus 163. The league leader is the Cowboys. They're plus 168. So the 49ers, they played a pretty good schedule. I mean, in fact, I looked at their opponent win percentage was like 527. That's second only to the Eagles, who have their opponents have a 531 winning percentage. So anyway, a lot of numbers on there, but you can see I tried to just highlight some of the important stats. They're second in points allowed, so their defense is really good. Third in points scored, so it's like their defense is really good. Their offense has been really good, and I think we all kind of acknowledge they have really elite talent on both sides of the ball. The Eagles.
Yeah. So hold
Go ahead.
on. So if I were gonna put the 49ers in like a college football context, okay, their division's okay. They're in the weaker conference, right? They're in the NFC. So, you gotta think about it that way. But I think the 49ers are in the team that's, they're in a little bit of a lesser conference or lesser league, but their domination is pretty hard to ignore, even against
Yeah, I mean,
good teams.
their schedule has been pretty good. I mean, like for instance, like I said, the 49ers, the opposing teams have a win percentage of 527. The Cowboys' opposing win percentage is 407. So, and I mean, you can even look at their records. Like the 49ers, the teams they played, their combined record is 77-69. The Cowboys, the teams they played, their combined record is 55-80. So that is kind of interesting. All right, so the Eagles, they still have the best record in the league. They've got some wins over some of the elite teams. You know, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Dolphins. Fourth in points scored, uh, fifth in rushing touchdowns. They're fourth in rush yards allowed. Um, there's obviously been some concern. They haven't necessarily played the best in a lot of these games. Like they kind of come out and they look kind of lackadaisical or whatever, and then they turn it on at the end. So that is kind of a concern. Whereas the 49ers have just, they've had some losses, but outside of that, they're pretty much dominating everybody they play, the good and the bad teams. So that's why the Eagles are 2, and they do have the best record in the league. The record does matter to an extent. So, and they still have the 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, so the
Go
Eagles are
ahead.
the team. The Eagles are the team that you would consider dropping in the rankings because they don't look good every week. They're winning, but we're all kind of like, I don't know about
Yeah, and
this.
I mean it's just they have that record, and I'm like, okay, and they have some good stats that kind of back things up, but it's just kind of like, that's the funny thing. The 49ers are the only team where I'm like, okay, if they have everybody there, I think they're the best team, and I feel really, really confident about it, right? These other teams, they've all got something where you're just like, oh, God, I don't like the Ravens, okay? Dynamic quarterback, Lamar Jackson, probably the most dynamic quarterback in the league. John Harbaugh, I think he's going to be a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, he's won so many freaking games. Their defense, they're first in points allowed, the fewest yards per play, fewest red zone touchdowns allowed. Seventh in their total yards on offense, fifth in their yards per play. I'm trying to think if they have any other stats on them. Their point differential plus 137. So they're actually, I think they're third in the league in point differential. So they've got some dominating wins, and they've won a lot of games. For comparison's sake, the Eagles' point differential is plus 41. So that's probably a concern. And the Ravens just, you watch them, and it's like they're a tough team, and they play good defense. They're able to run the ball. Their offense kind of leaves something to be desired. But, look, if you get into the playoffs, if there's going to be some tight, physical, close games, you could see them, winning some of those.
Yeah, the Ravens' issue is going to be can they hold a lead? Can they win close games against good teams? That's going to
Right.
be
I mean,
the
the loss to the Steelers was bad earlier in the season. When they lost to the Browns earlier in the year, they had a lead. They couldn't hold on to it. So, yeah, that's kind of working against them.
yeah. So
Um,
they would be we know they're good, but it's a question of, can they
right.
get it done against the best teams? But they have a player who's, probably if this were college football, Lamar Jackson would be up for the Heisman of the NFL.
Yeah. And I don't really necessarily believe in the Cowboys, but the problem is these other teams on this list, I don't really believe in them either. So I moved them ahead of the Chiefs and the Dolphins because I'm just like the Chiefs, their offense really concerns me. Whereas the Cowboys, we can split hairs on how good is the talent on offense and all that stuff, but their offensive line, the way it's playing now, has been really good, and they do have talent. I mean, Dak has been playing really well. CeeDee Lamb's really good. Brandon Cooks has been pretty good. Micah Parsons is, he can be kind of a game wrecker at times. So they've got plenty of talent. Like I said,
So
leader in points per game. Go ahead.
yeah, I would compare the Cowboys to LSU when Les Miles used to be the coach. They
Right.
have good enough talent to win the championship, but they always do some dumb thing that nobody can understand. The clock
Yeah.
management, or they commit too many penalties, or they just, and that's how they end up losing, and
Right.
that's what happens to the Cowboys in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at these numbers, like they've got some good numbers, especially on offense. I think it is a little concerning when you look at their defensive stats. Um, it's not like people have seemed to be able to pass on them, and other teams have been able to put up points on them. So I think if people try to say that Dallas has some sort of dominating defense, I don't think that's necessarily true. They have some talent and some guys make plays, but it's, it probably leaves a little something to be desired. And look, their strength of schedule is not really very good. like I was saying earlier, they've beat up on a lot of bad teams. Although they did play well against the Eagles, and they're playing the Eagles tonight, so we'll see how that goes. That is obviously a really big barometer, I guess you could say, for both of those teams.
Yep.
The Chiefs, this is tough, man. If they didn't have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I don't think they'd be on here because we're giving them the benefit of the doubt, basically just because they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. They did beat the Jaguars. They beat the Dolphins. Their defense, third in points allowed, fourth in yards per attempt. They're sixth in the league in passing touchdowns on offense. And I did find this stat, they're third in the league in the points they score in the second quarter. Although they have problems scoring in the second half of a lot of games. So,
yeah, the Chiefs are basically Alabama when Alabama's having an off year. Like, we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. We think they have it in them, but we're not seeing it.
Right, and they need to show us more, yeah. So, let's see, what else? And then I had to put them above the Dolphins because they beat the Dolphins, although that was a really close game. The Dolphins' offense they're just, I mean, granted, I know they're beating bad teams, but they really beat the shit out of bad teams. And some of their point differential is probably because of, scoring 70 points against the Broncos.
Right.
What's their point differential is plus 118. But still, I mean, yeah, they're beating up on a lot of teams, and their offense has, wrong thing. And their offense has, it can really click at times, and they can be really dangerous. They can really score a lot of points, but all their wins are against bad teams. So it's just tough to know. They've got to be able to beat some of these other teams in order for us to consider them, really good. And it's just so far it hasn't happened. So
yeah, I would. Yeah, the Dolphins are probably they're the most questionable team. They're the team that you're like, well, if everything breaks right, then maybe they have a shot. But the Dolphins also have a shot. I mean, this doesn't apply to college football really, but they have a shot at being the team that gets hot at the end of the season because their defense has been getting better,
right.
and they have something that can work. If they get to play games in warm weather at home. They have something that most other teams don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hang on. Willie, hey. Someone's really pissed off about the Dolphins. Willie, hey, come on, get out of there. I think the only other stats I wanted to bring up, just a couple things, were so points per game in the league. The Cowboys are number one at 32.3. The Dolphins have 32. They're number two. The 49ers have 29.3. So the 49ers just, I mean, they've got really good stats on offense. They got really good numbers on defense. And so it's just like, God, if they're healthy, like, I just don't see how you're supposed to beat them. And they've just dominated people so well. So, that's basically it. If your team was off the list, like, I don't know, the Jaguars, the Lions. Oh, I took the Jaguars off. That's what I did. Because they were kind of concerning me with Trevor Lawrence's injury, and just they don't really have any really good stats that you look at and go, oh, that tells me that they're really good. Their record's pretty good. But, well, actually, did they lose again today?
They did, yeah.
So, yeah, even that. So we'll probably talk more about all these teams on the list and then everybody else. Unless your team is the Pats, the Bears, the Giants, the Jets, or the Panthers. I mean, come on, guys. I don't think we really need to get into that. So,
yeah, those are like the when they do the top 25, others receiving votes.
Yeah,
they're not even in the poll.
Lions, like, guys, I just, do we trust the Lions? Come on. I mean, they've lost to the Bears both times. So
to win the Super Bowl, no.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I really want to. I think I should say this. Like, I'm not doing those rankings as if I think this is the team necessarily. I think this is the team that's going to win the Super Bowl. I'm just like, based on who's played this season, who do I think's the best team after 17 games? So,
Yeah, no, I think that's really fascinating way to do it.
Hey, can you guys stop it? Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah, so I think that we should I think we should that's how we should do that every week. We'll go talk about the NFL and rank the teams.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They've been sleeping all day, so now they're awake and they're losing their minds over every little thing. Um, so did you have any thoughts about any of the NFL so far today from the 1 o'clock games?
I think yeah, I mean I think anybody who thinks Brock Purdy's the MVP should have their head examined. Lamar Jackson was Lamar Jackson was unbelievable today and he's carrying the whole freaking team. I don't understand. Like I just don't get it. We all acknowledge Brock Purdy's maybe a top 10 quarterback, which by the way, the whole top 10 quarterback thing, that pisses me off to no end. There's 5, maybe 6 great quarterbacks in the NFL, and people continue to go, "Well, he's a top 10 QB." Okay, like the top 10.
Hey, hey, stop! Jesus.
When there's only 6 quarterbacks that matter, I don't really care if you're a top 10 quarterback or not.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But yeah, I mean, as far as the games go today, I mean, we'll see. Baltimore managed to sneak out that win against the Rams, and they returned a punt in overtime to win the game. So that was a hell of a job by Baltimore, and a hell of a job by the Rams to play that well. That I think is one of the amazing things this year is that the Rams have been a pretty good team, even though everybody the outlook before the season was pretty bleak.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we have guests on the podcast. Yeah, the dogs are they've been commenting on everything. So, that happens. It's all right. I'm trying to think of anything else I had for today. I mean, yeah, like the Lions, I just can't trust them. The Jaguars, the Browns, it's funny, the Browns and the Bengals, like they're not dead. The Browns, I think, probably have a better roster than the Bengals, but yeah, I mean the Browns, they look pretty good.
They have a good team. The Browns, that's the thing. The Browns have had a good team for the last 6-7 years. Like on both lines, they're really good. They have talent at every position. Like they can't get consistent quarterback play. That's one of the things that's slowed them down. But their defense is fantastic. So yeah, it's sad that if they had just had anybody at quarterback, and it shows that Cincinnati's a well coached team. Like they're winning games now with their backup quarterback. So
yeah, I think the Zach Taylor slander needs to stop. Oh, he's the worst quarterback. He's the worst coach in the division. Well, he can't be that bad. I mean, if they're still figuring out a way to win these games without Burrow, and so then it becomes what can the Browns do? Could they make the playoffs? I still think the Browns can make the playoffs. The Bengals, I'm a little less certain about, but yeah, I mean, and you look at what's happened to the Steelers. I mean, we were saying they were frauds weeks ago, but it's obviously it's showing up in the record now. So, I'm trying to think of anything else. I mean, obviously there's some big games. The Cowboys and then the Bills are playing the Chiefs right now, so that has obviously some implications. Yeah, it was a pretty good 1 o'clock window. I mean, it's funny. The NFC South, I mean, yeah, those teams aren't very good, but it is actually a pretty entertaining division. I mean,
the Tampa Atlanta game was really, really entertaining. That was really, really good stuff. But we'll see. I'm really kind of fascinated to assess kind of what happens in the NFL. The Dolphins actually have a shot at the 1 seed, Clark. I mean, I don't think it's a great shot, but they have a shot.
Yeah.
They have a legitimate shot at it. And I think it's going to probably come down to the Dolphins having to play Baltimore on New Year's Eve, I think. If we'll see where they get, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. The Dolphins have to win the next 2 games, and the Jets actually look like a viable football team today, which I'm shocked. But
Yeah, I mean, I think the Texans, they got some major injuries on offense, and that's a serious problem. And now I think it's C.J. Stroud. It looked like he was in the concussion protocol because he
Yep.
got slammed down on the ground. His head, that was brutal. So yeah, maybe they're kind of that's going to. But again, I think the Texans, you just kind of put them into this stew with all the other teams in the AFC that are like right around there. Like the Colts and the Browns and the Bengals, and even that you can put the Steelers in there and the Bills, and maybe you put the Broncos in there if they can win the game today. So yeah, it's just, and that's all kind of, you know, I don't know what to make any of those teams. Could any of them win a playoff game? Yeah, maybe. Could they win multiple playoff games? Yeah, I kind of doubt it.
So Kansas City just scored, so Buffalo is up 14-7 on them in this almost halftime. Anyway, yeah. So that's all I really had on the NFL for today. Anyway.
Yeah. So obviously we got some other games coming up, and I'll keep doing the those rankings every week. I mean, it's funny. I don't know how much they're really going to. Well, I don't necessarily know that another team's going to jump up into there, unless I put the Jaguars in there or something. I think maybe the rankings from 2 to 6 might shift a little bit, but I mean, I just don't see how much things can change because I just don't. What other teams outside of there do I trust? And I don't even trust those teams that much.
Well,
You
we're now in the stretch run where if a team's going to get hot and do some damage, it's going to start happening. So we'll
Right.
see. Next week it might not change that much, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. And the Eagles Cowboys game is going to be important tonight. So that might
That's a really big one.
you might have to adjust after that. All right. So I wanted to talk about the NBA in-season tournament before we get out of here. So I mean, I got to say, Clark, first of all, my initial reaction was, oh, we're going to do this in-season tournament. I was like, oh, good. The NBA is trying something. They're trying to actually get people to pay attention to their games. And all you heard was, well, nobody's going to care about this. What the hell is the NBA doing? How is this going to work? It doesn't make sense. What the hell is happening? Blah, blah, blah. It's just constant. Anytime it's just crazy. Anybody tries anything new, it's just constant opposition to it. And my whole attitude was, guys, can we just let it happen and let's see how it works? Let's see how it goes. Like if it fails, it's not that big a deal. Like, but I think the NBA should try stuff because their regular season has been getting worse. So it's getting worse every year. So we've got to do something to try to increase it. And I got to tell you, Clark, this is a home run. I watched a lot of the games the last week. I watched all the semifinal games and I watched some of the quarterfinal games. And first of all, the excitement and the intensity from the players was awesome. The intensity was like a playoff game. And they played the semifinals and the finals in Vegas, and the Lakers won it last night. And I mean, now it wasn't playoff level play. Okay. The level of play was not what you would see in playoff games, but the teams cared. They were playing their asses off. The games in the home arenas before we got there, like Indiana playing against Boston the other night, dude, that place was like a college football game. It was insane. Everybody's going nuts. The teams are really into it. And I think the cool part about it, Clark, is that all right, like let's say Phoenix, right? They don't have Bradley Beal. Denver doesn't have Jamal Murray, right? So they didn't make it very far into the tournament. But the teams that did were super excited to be there. And if you watch the way LeBron played the last 3 games, LeBron was playing these games like it's game 7 of the finals. Like he was going full bore the whole time. He's taking charges, playing defense, going to the basket over and over and over again. Like it was sensational. So I give the NBA credit. And the other thing that I didn't realize, Clark, I heard Brian Windhorst was on Ryan Russillo's podcast the other day, and he basically explained like the reason that the tournament doesn't have a name, it's just called the NBA in-season tournament, is because they're going to sell this tournament. They want to sell it for $1 billion. Okay, that's why there's sponsorships for the tournament, but there's no like main sponsor for it because they wanted to put it out there, have it be good, and drive the price up. So for this tournament, Clark, the team that won, each player got $500,000.
Right.
If they sell this tournament for $1 billion to TV networks or whatever it is, like, could you imagine if players win this tournament, they get $10 million each?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it doesn't matter for LeBron and Durant. It doesn't matter for the best players in the NBA, but it matters for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like the last 4 or 5 guys on the Lakers bench, this was like 20-30% of their salary getting the 500 grand.
Yeah.
So I think that this, if that happens and they're able to sell this, and no, there's a couple of tweaks I would do. Number one, they should play more games. They only play 4 games in the group play, and then they move on to the knockout round. They should play each team in your group on the road and away. So I think they should play 8 games instead of 4. So double the amount of games in the first part of it, and then let 16 teams advance to the advance past the knockout stage instead of 8. So I think that, and the other thing I think, Clark, is they should have a tournament in the beginning of the season and then do one later on in the season.
Right.
Because just when and if you don't believe this works, watch LeBron holding up the trophy after the team won. All you got to do, remember, these are the most competitive people on the planet, professional athletes. Okay, you give them a trophy to win where they can beat other people at something, and they're all motivated to win.
Right.
Like, this isn't even about 500 grand. Yeah, that's nice. Everybody wants extra money, but that's not what was driving these guys to play like this. And the other thing is, if you haven't seen Tyrese Halliburton play, like, this guy could be the next star. And the Indiana Pacers don't get on TV. They don't get any national games.
Yeah.
So these are the first time that any of these guys played on national TV. And they played great. They made it all the way to the finals, and they gave the Lakers a run. So this is fantastic, and I hope they expand this and come up with new ideas and keep going, and change the format a little bit or whatever. Keep trying to make it better, because it works. And by the way, what they did in Vegas, the way it looked on television was fabulous. It looked like the NCAA tournament when they do like the Elite Eight or the Final Four. There was basically a spotlight on the court, and the rest of the stands were dark. So it looked like it was like I'm watching a Broadway show or something. So the way that this was done was really, really spectacular. Now, the only criticism I would say is, like, playing these games at a neutral site, you don't get quite the same atmosphere, right? You got more of an atmosphere because they were Laker fans in Vegas. But so I think that's something they're going to have to consider. But if they make this more of an event, then you'll get a more involved crowd. Right. So, so I just want to run through a couple of my thoughts from watching some of the teams. And that's the cool part, Clark. You can actually watch these games, which count every game except the final game counts as a regular season game. So you can watch regular season games in the NBA and actually kind of see what a team's made of and what they might have to do going forward. So the Lakers, like, my inclination at the beginning of the season was the Lakers should be good because of all of the depth that they have and all the athletes they have on their team. Watching them in this tournament, they have a lot of stuff they need to work out. And that's why they've kind of struggled to start off the season. But the Clark, I mean, they're huge. When they put Anthony Davis and LeBron and like Cam Reddish and Vanderbilt and Hachimura out there at the same time, Clark, they're freaking huge. They're a huge team, and you saw it when they played Phoenix. I think they played them on Tuesday night, and Phoenix couldn't handle them. Phoenix had no chance because the Lakers were just way too big, and that's what happened against Indiana. Clark, they scored, I think the Lakers had 120 points in the final game. They had 88 points in the paint. They were absolutely destroying them. So I think the Lakers have a chance to be unbelievable on defense. You can see they just don't have all the stuff worked out, and people are not in the right place sometimes and whatever. And they turn over the ball a little too much. But on defense, they have a chance to be unbelievable. Offense, like when LeBron is out there, they're a top 10 offense. When he's not, they're not very good. So they're gonna have to figure out, they're gonna have to figure out, do they have enough shooting? They don't really have like a dead eye shooter on their team, but they have Reeves and Hachimura. They're capable of making threes, but that's gonna be an issue for them. But a lot of it was they just didn't quite know. Everybody else doesn't know what they're doing because these guys are just kind of they were kind of thrown together before the season started. So they don't have all that worked out. But LeBron and Anthony Davis do. Like, they know exactly what they're doing. So I think the Lakers are going to be, they may not be like right at the top of the list of championship contenders, but I think they're in there because, like I said, Clark, all the length and size they have on defense, they're going to be a nightmare to play. Like, I don't think, like, honestly, and when I watch them play Phoenix, and I'll give you my take on Phoenix. Phoenix they're just too small. Like, I just don't, they kept having to remove centers and take guys out, and they took Nurkic out, and then they got this other guy in there, and it's just they can't really guard the rim. So I don't know how they're going to deal with this. They just don't have enough size, I think, to compete with these other teams. Now, offensively, Phoenix is going to be scary because Booker and Durant. They only had Booker and Durant in that game, and they almost beat the Lakers. So they're going to be offensively. They're going to be a pain in the butt. But I question whether they have enough shooting. Other than the main three guys, I just don't know. Can you trust these guys in a playoff series? But I think, yeah, it's just funny. Like, I'm watching the TNT halftime, and Barkley's like, well, their weakness is going to be that they're small. And I'm like, okay, that can't really be your weakness in 2023. Like, if you're too small, I just don't. In the half court, you're going to have a hard time beating a team like the Lakers because.
Well, and we knew that going in. We were critical of that from the beginning with Phoenix.
Yeah,
and I find it interesting that Bradley Beal keeps missing all these games.
Yeah, it's crazy. That being said, though, Durant is playing out of his freaking mind. Like, he's absolutely insane right now. So I don't know, if that keeps up, but he's definitely going to be in the MVP conversation. He keeps playing like this because the guy was unstoppable.
Well, and LeBron, just real quick, I was telling you this the other day. I mean, just watching some of the highlights of him the last couple weeks. I mean, the way that he's moving to the basket, I mean, it looks like LeBron from 7 or 8 years ago. He's 39. Like, we've never seen this before, where a guy this old is just, looking like arguably the best player in the league. I mean, we'll see if he keeps this up, but I mean, you got to give him some MVP votes at this rate. I mean, the way that he's just, the way that he's scoring and the way that he's kind of orchestrating stuff at the end of games. I mean, it's just, for someone this old, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I guess flying.
We've become desensitized to it because this is what he does, but it's like, guys, we don't realize how amazing this is.
Yeah, he's flying up and down the court. You could tell in these tournament games he wanted it bad. He was in, NBA playoff mode, just, absolutely killing people. And then I heard from Brian Windhorst that he was getting to the arena like, 8 hours early or whatever. Like, he was totally into this, totally motivated to win it. And it honestly, that's huge for the NBA. The NBA is really lucky that LeBron got his team there, because if this had been, Indiana playing against Sacramento, that I don't think you would have generated the same kind of thing. But yeah, LeBron was unbelievable in all the games. Right. I think he really wanted this tournament. I think he's gonna back it off a little bit and take it easy probably the next week. But
yeah. But I mean, it just goes to show you that, like, if the people who are doing something look like they're interested in it, then that can be infectious, and other people watch and go, "Oh, what are those people doing over there?" Because they seem to really be into it. So it's really good that the players, like, and I was kind of surprised. I mean, they're like popping champagne in the locker room, and they're like, they have a trophy presentation, and they're all just kind of really excited about it. I'm like, oh, all right. Like, I mean, if they can kind of keep that going, then yeah, this is a huge hit. So, I think the NBA really needed to do something, and I think they had a good idea. Clearly,
I think it helps the monotony of the regular season. Like, the Premier League does this, like, these teams play in different tournaments throughout the season, and it helps keep people interested. And plus, it's not just, the one team wins one trophy at the end of the season and that's it. When you have a chance to win a trophy, it just changes the way that it's looked at, not just from the players, but from the fans' perspective. And so I think it may take a few years, but once people see that, my team can win something, okay, it's just going to keep people interested. See a couple more teams. I mean, watch Milwaukee play. They lost to Indiana. Yeah, Milwaukee's having some defensive issues, but a lot of it is just kind of effort stuff. Like they're not getting back in transition. They're losing guys, and I think it's because they've got a new coach and they changed defensive systems, so they don't have it figured out yet. It is a little bit. You watch them play. It is a little bit disturbing that they can't just get basic. They're not doing basic things correctly. So that's a little bit of a concern. Offensively, they're going to be fine. Like, Giannis is shooting like 62% for the season, and you can see when Lillard gets going, he's Damian Lillard. Like there's only a handful of guys like him. So
Right.
I think they have some stuff they need to worry about. Middleton looks better. Chris Middleton looks, he looks like he's gonna be all right. I just don't know if he's gonna get to the level that they need him to be at by the end of the season. But Milwaukee's, I'm not freaking out. If I'm a Bucks fan, I'm not freaking out. Like these are things that can be fixed. These are, same thing as the Lakers. These are issues that can be fixed. You gotta kind of work them out. And it's different when you have a new coach. It takes some time.
Well, that would concern me is that a coaching issue that they're not doing basic stuff? So again, that was a question we had going into the season. It's like,
yeah, they also have some guys that they're depending on that I don't know how that's going to go. So we'll see. They don't have their 6th, 7th, 8th guys are not necessarily guys you would want to be depending on. So we'll see how that goes. But you would think around 3 or 4 good players that you would be able to figure that out. But yeah, there I'm not going to lie, there are some concerns there. Indiana was getting wide open layups way too many times in this game just by running the floor, and so that's a little bit disturbing. And you can tell Giannis is pissed. Like you can see that he's not happy about what's going on when he's out there. Boston, they lost. They didn't have Porzingis against Indiana, and they ended up losing the game. But they still struggle from the same things at the end of games. And by the way, that's the nice part about the tournament, Clark, is this gets revealed now because when you're in tough games that are super intense, you get to see how it goes. And it's a lot of Boston clogged toilet offense, jacking up threes at the end of games when it's close. The game was close with 2 minutes to go. The game was tied with 2 minutes to go. And Indiana just flat out outplayed them. And so, they're supposed to be good. I thought Boston was supposed to be good on defense. Halliburton was just going wherever he wanted. So there's some issues with the Celtics, and it hasn't really changed. Now, look, if they had Porzingis, they probably win that game. But I do agree with Bill Simmons. Like if they don't have Porzingis, they're not going to the finals. Like they've got to have him. And unfortunately, is he going to be healthy in the playoffs? I have no idea. But it's funny, Clark. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm watching this Boston team and I'm going, I feel the same way about them that I used to, and I don't feel like I think Drew Holiday is going to help, but I don't feel like he kind of knows where to fit in yet. I don't think they have it worked out with the personalities who's supposed to do what yet, and I think that's a bit of an issue. They talk about with the Clippers, there's not enough basketballs. Well, this team might have similar problems. I don't think everybody quite fits into their role yet. And that stuff can be fixed. But at the same time, like these are problems we've been talking about the Celtics for years now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, it's the same kind of issue. That's why we were talking at the beginning of the podcast about how people forget what happened last year. And I just remembered like in the offseason, people were like, oh, I think Boston's going to be really good. And I'm like, you guys forget what just happened in the playoffs with them? Like they were just, their offense looked bad. They're doing stupid crap. The coaching issues, like, okay.
Yeah, you can tell me they're the most talented team in the Eastern Conference. That's fine. But as we've seen from the NBA playoffs, like it doesn't really matter. Miami beat them last year with far less talent. And it's just because they were tougher than them and didn't fall apart when things didn't go well. The Heat stuck with it. They know what they're doing the whole time. And that was basically what won the series for them. My last thought is, Zion. I mean, I said before the season, I'm out on Zion Williamson. Yeah, the dude's still not in shape. Like we're in year 5. He's still can't get his act together, still can't get on the right plan. And this was the year, Clark. This was the year. I've been on a diet. I'm doing everything right. Everything's going to be great. And you watch him play, Clark. The guy can play 4 or 5 minutes and then he's got to go sit down. Like it's just, I just don't understand how now if you're New Orleans, you don't have a choice. You got to just wait and see if he figures it out at some point. But it's getting to the point where it's too late. And at this point, and now teams have figured out exactly how to guard him. Like they put LeBron, the Lakers played the Pelicans, they put LeBron on him, and you think, oh, why would you put LeBron on Zion? All LeBron did was stand in the paint and just wait for Zion to do something because he's not going to shoot. He's not going to take a jump shot because he's he still can't shoot, so he's not going to shoot from the outside, and everything's going right to the rim. That's the only thing he can do. So yeah, it's this could get ugly. This could get bad really fast. But it's one of those things, Clark. I'm out on him because he's immature.
Yeah. It's kind of sad because there's a lot of potential. Same thing with like Ben Simmons. There's just a lot of potential, but injuries are just not being as into it as you need to be. So that's just how it goes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and again, these guys think they've done nothing wrong, so they see no reason to change. So why would they?
Yeah, just kind of that's a problem the NBA's had for a long time.
But yeah, so NBA in-season tournament, big thumbs up. I hope they do this again because and if they need, and I think they need to do it later in the season so it doesn't go up against football.
Well, before we get out of here, I just want to let people know, I don't know, either the next podcast or the one after, we're going to have to do Sports Festivus, the airing of sports grievances, because it's December. So when this podcast used to be called something else, we did that a couple times. So yeah, we're going to be looking forward to that. Now I've got some graphics I can probably do, so make it even more fun. So get your grievances ready.
All right, folks, make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Clark, good job today. And
you as well.
Go Dolphins on Monday night, baby.
Go Bills. Beat the Chiefs.
That's right. Go Bills.
Yeah.
All right, everybody have a good one. Later.